as the Advent day of Bhagavad-Gita is approaching, I thought it would be nice to look at perhaps the most powerful statement about the importance of Bhagavad-Gita by Arjuna Prabhu, who was the recipient of the Bhagavad-Gita from Krishna. Because you were never envious of me, I will impart unto you this most confidential of all knowledge. He wasn't a Brahmin, he was a family man, he was a warrior, statesman, politician, but he was Krishna's dearmost friend. So, the Srimad Bhagavatam in the first canto, there are some very important chapters describing the disappearance of Lord Krishna and how that affected Arjuna and his brothers, also very confidential dear devotees, the Pandavas, Maharaj Yudhishthira, Arjuna, Bhima, Sahadev, Nakula, Mother Kunti, Draupadi. So, Arjuna had been with Lord Krishna and had returned to Hastinapur, where Maharaj Yudhishthira was, after the Battle of Kurukshetra, duly installed by the will of Krishna, by Krishna's desire, as the emperor of the entire world. And Arjuna reported to Maharaj Yudhishthira the departure of the Lord back to the spiritual world. And after making many, many statements about how he remembered how much he was empowered in the personal presence of Lord Krishna, I have the very same Gandiva bow, the same arrows, the same chariot drawn by the same horses, and I use them as the same Arjuna to whom all kings offer their due respects. But in the absence of Lord Krishna, all of them at a moment's notice have become null and void. It is exactly like offering clarified butter on ashes, accumulating money with a magic wand, or sowing seeds in a barren land. And then he actually reports what happened. O king, since you have asked me, Yudhishthira, about our friends and relatives in the city of Dwarka, I will inform you that all of them were cursed by the Brahmanas, and as a result they all became intoxicated with wine made of putrefied rice and fought among themselves with sticks, not even recognizing one another. Now all but 4 or 5 of them are dead and gone. So, many, many verses of lamentation. And then finally, he speaks this. Desha kalarta yuktani rittapopa samani cha aranti smaratas chittam govinda bihitani me. Now I am attracted to those instructions imparted to me by the personality of Godhead, Govinda. O Govinda, I shall not fight. He addresses Krishna at the beginning of Bhagavad-Gita. Govinda, because they are impregnated with instructions for relieving the burning heart in all circumstances and time and space. So I chose this verse and we'll read the purport in its entirety. This is a very good summary of the entire Bhagavad-Gita, its content, the intention of the Lord, its importance for everyone, and as Arjuna just said here, in all times and in all places and circumstances. Herein, Arjuna refers to the instructions of the Bhagavad-Gita which were imparted to him by the Lord on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. The Lord left behind him the instructions of the Bhagavad-Gita not for the benefit of Arjuna alone, but also for all time and in all lands. The Bhagavad-Gita, being spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the essence of all Vedic wisdom. It is nicely presented by the Lord himself for all who have very little time to go through the vast Vedic literatures like the Upanishads, Puranas, and Vedanta Sutras. It is put within the study of the great historical epic, Mahabharata, which was especially prepared for the people of this age. We're in a fallen condition. The problem which arose in the heart of Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra was solved by the teachings of the Bhagavad-Gita. Again, after the departure of the Lord from the vision of earthly people, when Arjuna was face to face with being vanquished in his acquired power and prominence, he wanted again to remember the great teachings of the Bhagavad-Gita, just to teach all concerned that the Bhagavad-Gita can be consulted in all critical times, not only for solace from all kinds of mental agonies, but also for the way out of great entanglements which may embarrass one in some critical hour. The merciful Lord left behind in the great teachings of the Bhagavad-Gita so that one may take the instructions of the Lord even when he is not visible to material eyesight. Material senses cannot have any estimation of the Supreme Lord, but by his inconceivable power, the Lord can incarnate himself to the sense perception of the conditioned souls in a suitable manner through the agency of matter, which is also another form of the Lord's manifested energy. Thus, the Bhagavad-Gita, or any authentic scriptural sound representation of the Lord, is also the incarnation of the Lord. There is no difference between the sound representation of the Lord and the Lord himself. One can derive the same benefit from the Bhagavad-Gita as Arjuna did in the personal presence of the Lord. The faithful human being who is desirous of being liberated from the clutches of material existence can very easily take advantage of the Bhagavad-Gita, and with this in view, the Lord instructed Arjuna as if Arjuna were in need of it. In the Bhagavad-Gita, 5 important factors of knowledge have been delineating pertaining to 1, the Supreme Lord, 2, the living being, 3, nature, 4, time and space, and 5, the process of activity. Out of these, the Supreme Lord and the living being are qualitatively one. The difference between the two has been analyzed as the difference between the whole and the part and parcel. Nature is inert matter displaying the interaction of 3 different modes, and eternal time and unlimited space are considered to be beyond the existence of material nature. Activities of the living being are different varieties of aptitudes which can entrap or liberate the living being within and without material nature. All these subject matters are concisely discussed in the Bhagavad-Gita. And later, the subject matters are elaborated in the Srimad Bhagavatam for further enlightenment. Out of these 5 subjects, the Supreme Lord, the living entity, nature and time and space are eternal, but the living entity, nature and time are under the direction of the Supreme Lord, who is absolute and completely independent of any other control. The Supreme Lord is the Supreme Controller. The material activity of a living being is beginningless, but it can be rectified by transferal into the spiritual quality. Thus, it can cease its material qualitative reactions. Both the Lord and the living entity are cognizant, and both have the sense of identification. of being conscious as a living force. But the living being under the condition of material nature called Mahatattva misidentifies himself as being different from the Lord. The whole scheme of Vedic wisdom is targeted to the aim of eradicating such a misconception and thus liberating the living being from the illusion of material identification. When such an illusion is eradicated by knowledge and renunciation, the living beings are responsible actors and enjoyers also. The sense of enjoyment in the Lord is real, but such a sense in the living being is a sort of wishful desire only. This difference in consciousness is the distinction of the two identities, namely the Lord and the living being. Otherwise, there is no difference between the Lord and the living being. The living being is therefore eternally one and different simultaneously. The whole instruction of the Bhagavad-Gita stands on this principle. In the Bhagavad-Gita, the Lord and the living beings are both described as Sanatana, or eternal, and the Lord's abode, far beyond the material sky, is also described as Sanatana. The living being is invited to live in the Sanatana existence of the Lord, and the process which can help the living being to approach the Lord's abode, where the liberated activity of the soul is exhibited, is called Sanatan Dharma. One cannot, however, reach the eternal abode of the Lord without being free from the misconception of material identification, and the Bhagavad-Gita gives us the clue how to achieve this stage of perfection. The process of being liberated from the misconception of material identification is called in different stages: fruitive activity, empiric philosophy, and devotional service, up to transcendental realization. Such transcendental realization is made possible by dovetailing all the above items in relation with the Lord. Prescribed duties of the human being, as directed in the Vedas, can gradually purify the sinful mind of the conditioned soul and raise him to the stage of knowledge. The purified stage of acquiring knowledge becomes the basis of devotional service to the Lord. As long as one is engaged in researching the solutions of the problems of life, his knowledge is called jnana, or purified knowledge. But on realizing the actual solution of life, one becomes situated in the devotional service of the Lord. The Bhagavad-Gita begins with the problems of life by discriminating the soul from the elements of matter, and proves by all reason and argument that the soul is indestructible in all circumstances, and that the outer covering of matter, the body and the mind, change for another term of material existence, which is full of miseries. The Bhagavad-Gita is therefore meant for terminating all different types of miseries, and Arjuna took shelter of this great knowledge which had been imparted to him during the Kurukshetra battle. Hare Krishna. Om Adhyanatimurandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapanantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sarvajatam Sagana Raghunatam Gitam Nam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sakana Lalita Shri Vishakavitamscha. Hey Krishna. Vrishabhanu Sute Devi. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Vishnupadaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Hospita Deshatarane. Is there a hardbound Bhagavad-Gita that I could use? I heard an interesting anecdote about just recently. The power of Srila Prabhupada's Pranam mantra. One of the early Russian devotees, Padmavati Devi, she unfortunately had to face the KGB and thank you very much. And they were trying to do all kinds of things to break her faith. And they ultimately brought in what they considered to be was a practicing witch, doing witchcraft to try to possess her with evil forces. And she was chanting Ma mantra, Panchatattva mantra, Nishringadev mantra. But that didn't stop. But then finally, when she started chanting Prabhupada's Pranam mantras, this witch person who was brought in by the KGB said, I can't go any forward. I'm very sorry. The spiritual master is standing over me and saying, if I go any further, that I will be vanquished forever. I'm out of here. Wow. So, we're coming from New York City. New York City has been added as the 4th international temple for the entire ISKCON. Does anyone know who the first 3 are? I'll give you a hint. These places were established in Prabhupada's time when he was present. I'll give you even another hint. They're in the homeland where most of you have come from, India. That's right, 1, Mayapur, and Bombay, now Mumbai. So New York City is designated as an international zone. And anyway, it's where Prabhupada originated the Krishna consciousness movement. So just like in Mayapur and Vrindavan, you go on pilgrimage to see the Leela stands. And in Bombay, Prabhupada went here, went there. So New York, where Prabhupada was, there are many, many places that you can visit, such as 26 2nd Avenue. This is the key that opens up 26 2nd Avenue. Key to the city, right? I was just there last night, actually.
Was it locked?
Yes, it was locked. That's why I had the key to unlock it. And Tompkins Square Park. But Prabhupada, at this time of the year, he came in 1965, September. He spent a month in Pennsylvania, Butler, and then a little week of preaching in Slippery Rock and University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. This is where Ravindra Swarup and his then girlfriend at the time, now his wife of almost 55 or more years, Siddhamati, were going to school, and Ravindra Swarup saw Prabhupada walking across the campus. So, and then he took somehow Prabhupada got the contact of this Dr. Mishra, and he had a penthouse apartment on the 14th floor of 33 Riverside Drive, which is basically 75th Street all the way by the Hudson River. You can probably see New Jersey from here, from there. Yes. And so after maybe a couple of weeks, the Leela Rita says, when it became inconvenient to maintain Prabhupada in the apartment, or that inconvenience because Prabhupada just was smashing his Mayavad philosophy, then he put Prabhupada in 100 West 72nd Street in his windowless 5th floor yoga studio. And was anybody here in New York on November 9th, 1965? Raise their hand. The Great Blackout, which, trapped like 800,000 people in the subway and the whole East Coast and 3 Canadian provinces all without power for like about 14 or 16 hours. Prabhupada was. And also then Prabhupada moved into a beautiful 3rd floor apartment which had windows overlooking Columbus Avenue and 72nd Street. You could see that apartment from the street. The first building, a little storefront, which at the time was 2 stories, now it's 3 stories tall, the same original architecture, 143 West 72nd Street. And the West End Superette, which where Prabhupada would go shopping, so you could actually see these places. Now the significance of 100 West 72nd Street in relation to the Bhagavad-Gita, who has heard Prabhupada's dictation of Introduction to Bhagavad-Gita that was spoken? Prabhupada recorded that there in that place. Plus, most of his solitary bhajans, like prayers to Queen Kunti, Shukadeva Goswami's invocation prayers for Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd Canto, Chapter 4. Prabhupada recorded it there in that place. And Prabhupada would daily have to take that walk from 100 West 72nd Street to Riverside Drive to bathe and to cook. I take devotees on that tour, and especially this time of year when it's cold, Prabhupada is walking. It's a considerable distance. It's a good 15 to 20 minute walk one way. So much Prabhupada had to go through. So Prabhupada very much wanted the Bhagavad-Gita to be the first and main book to come with. He actually had translated it back in India, but somehow the original manuscript was stolen and he had to rewrite it again. And then finally, when he was over here, there was the miracle of the Macmillan Company picking up the publishing. And people like Allen Ginsberg had come forward as an early supporter, and he was a pretty big name, and he was a poet, he was a writer, and even his publishing people wouldn't publish the book. And then here's the potency of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and one potency. So the Happening album was made, and that album went viral amongst the underground community, and somehow a worker at the Macmillan Company had ordered the record. And it, in those days it was like, send your $3, including postage, and it will be mailed to you. And when so it was from Macmillan Company, then Brahmananda, the temple president, became very excited and told the Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, you go there personally and deliver it. But when Brahmananda got there, he saw that it was just a clerk working in the office, and it's like, what kind of clout? And while he was there, giving the man the album in an office, Mr. Wade, who was like a senior editor, one of the top 5 people of the whole company, came down, and Brahmananda just blurted out what Prabhupada told him to say, that I have a Bhagavad-Gita that needs to be published. And Brahmananda was incredulous. How is this going to happen? And so this Mr. Wade said, really? We have a Quran, we have a Torah, we have an I Ching, but we need a Bhagavad-Gita to complete our religious portfolio. And it's made by an Indian Swami? Yeah, Indian Swami right here in New York. We'll publish it, sight unseen. So as we're hearing in this wonderful, so I don't want to put this on the seat, I'm going to put this like here and then reach for it. This can be brought over a little bit. That's right. So in all times, in all places, and in all circumstances, the Bhagavad Gita can be referred to by one and all, this wonderful statement, consulted in all critical times, not only for solace from all kinds of mental agonies, but but also for some way out of great entanglements which may embarrass one in some critical hour. So the ultimate entanglement is misidentifying ourselves as this body. And as Prabhupada is saying later in the purport, the whole Bhagavad-Gita is targeted with all reason and argument to convince you that you are not your body, your spirit soul. A little poetry, meant to taste love of God, it's life's ultimate goal. So, Prabhupada's purport here is so comprehensive and all-inclusive, miraculously, in just a summary, that the entire essence of Bhagavad-Gita, and in a sense, the whole, and Prabhupada says in one place in the Bhagavatam, Vedic adventure is placed here. Prabhupada said, I've put everything into the first canto. You simply read the first canto, and that's enough for you to go back home, back to Godhead. So I could stop. I could go over step by step, but it's already 7:15, and questions and answers might glean some good discussion, which might be superior to me making a summary. Murli Vadaka Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So in the second chapter of the Gita, Krishna's explaining one shouldn't grieve for anyone. Now, did Arjuna forget that instruction? Because in the end of the 8th chapter of the Bhagavatam, it's described that all the Pandavas were overwhelmed with grief when they were taking care of the rites for their so how do we understand the instruction and then their actions?
Putting things into perspective. I believe that it's described that they pacified all the relatives and what to speak of themselves with transcendental knowledge. And in the case of the Lord, his disappearance and or the disappearance of pure devotees, great personalities, it's a twofold feeling in that grieving or lamentation, in that we are sad because we don't have their association in what we consider this normal way. We're seeing each other with our eyes, we're hearing each other with our ears, we're contemporaries living, we don't know anybody who lived 100 years ago or 100 years from now. We're all here, whether we're 3 or 4 years old or 70 years old, somehow we're all here together. But on the transcendental platform, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you. There were all these kings on the battlefield, nor will there ever be a time when any of us will cease to exist. So the pure devotee, as we were hearing, that jnana and vairagya become concomitant factors on the strength of one's devotion. So practicing bhakti yoga exclusively, automatically all other necessary constituents of the karma, jnana, and yoga path all arise automatically. Prabhupada would be traveling by train in India or be at a big pandal, and well-wishing admirers would come up, and some of them a little tainted. Swamiji, show us a miracle. And Prabhupada would simply point to his disciples, these are my miracles. Like that. So the more that we practice devotional service in our life, the more that we're given insight. So, and along with that, we rejoice that the pure devotee has gone back home, back to Godhead. And in the case of an authorized distributor of spiritual knowledge, one who's authorized to connect us by the disciplic succession, so many things can be said. There's one nice example given, that they've crossed the ocean of nescience on the boat of transcendental knowledge. But miraculously, even though they've crossed in that boat remains sitting at the dock of the bay for us to get into. Infallible boat. We think that we have met your goodness by the will of providence, just that we may accept you as captain of the ship to guide us across this dangerous ocean of Kali Yuga, which diminishes all the good qualities of the human being. How's that?
Can I push a little further?
Okay.
So, for us, does that mean that if we feel grief for someone, is that automatically that, aside from the spiritual master, is that automatically mean that we're in Maya, or is there some legitimacy to our feeling grief?
Yeah, why not? Because we say, pray for me. Do we have feelings? And if we are advanced in devotional service, our feelings of concern for others will certainly help them to make the transition. In the case of someone who's passed away, just like, someone passes away and we ask the devotees to perform ceremony and kirtan. Many, many times I'm asked, do kirtan, my such and such is about to pass away, or they've passed away, can you dedicate, But it's tempered, that we know that the soul is eternal, and especially for devotees, they're not under the laws of karma. And even if they're not completely pure devotees, Krishna's taken their case personally. There's a verse in the 8th canto, I forget exactly where, but Prabhupada says, it's not that Krishna's just pleased only with the pure devotees. He's pleased with all the devotees at whatever level that they're on, and will give them all instruction and all facility to come to the ultimate perfection. And in the course of nature, 8,400,000 species of life and transmigrating for millions and millions of years, it's very, very quick. Vaikuntanath Prabhu, you probably heard this, he's one of the early disciples. He was at the Radha Damodar in 1972 Nectar of Devotion. And he had heard that unless one is initiated, one is in danger of falling back down into the animal species, and Prabhupada is stressing book distribution. And we heard Ramachandra Prabhu say they get the book, their life is saved. They don't get they get a human birth. What to speak, even they get a sweet ball, they hear the holy name. They just touch the book. Devotees were even saying, Prabhupada, during the height of book distribution, they're throwing the books in the garbage, like this shouldn't be done, and maybe we should You know what Prabhupada said? They're throwing their babies in the garbage. What can be done? So at least they touch it and then throw it in the garbage. They're getting benefit. So, how was it? Very, 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 so Vaikuntanath. So he's saying this doubt to Prabhupada. And if those of you who've been to Radha Damodar, of course, it was less developed than it was back then. There was a couple of steps from the temple courtyard where you could see the deities up onto the veranda to go to where Prabhupada's rooms were. And Prabhupada is taking those 2 steps, and he's blurting this. And Prabhupada, you said that unless they're initiated, and before he could even say the whole thing, Prabhupada just turned around, looked him right in the eye, said, as soon as they get my book and even read a word, they are initiated. See, the result of offenses and karmic activity, even the most heinous, is temporary, even by our calculation, if it's so many hundreds, thousands, millions of years or whatever. But the result of devotional service is eternal. And the result of Svalpamapyasya Dharmasya, even a little devotional service, not only does it guarantee, but it forces, it necessitates another chance to perform devotional service. Therefore, how important that it is that we are out in public as much as possible to give people the chance. Prabhupada said, I've created your good fortune. Here is a nice letter that Prabhupada wrote to one of his early disciples, Damodar. He joined in 26 2nd Avenue, January 10th, 1971. Every one of you should be thoroughly convinced of the power of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to protect you in all circumstances and chant accordingly at all times without offense. Then advancement will be swift, and you will gradually come to see everything clearly so that you may act for the pleasure of the Lord without uncertainty. When one is spontaneously engaged in this way, always in the service of the Lord, and anxious to avoid all mundane activities, he is actually experiencing the taste of bliss in Krishna consciousness. So as the Bhagavad-Gita is the sound incarnation of the Lord, the holy name is the direct sound incarnation of the Lord. There's basically no difference between book distribution and Harinam Sankirtan. They're both qualitatively one and the same, manifested as different efficacies, just like Brihad Mridanga. It doesn't mean that it's greater, but if its efficacy, like that Krishna book sat in Prabhu Vishnu Prabhu's shelf or box, shelf for 2 years. Here's another example that a young hippie lady in the 1970s got the Krishna book at the state fair, put the book on her shelf, forgot about it, got married, had kids. 25, 30 years later, in the mid-1990s, her 20-something son said, "Mom, who is God?" And said, "Read this book, it'll tell you." Now he became a duly initiated, second initiated, I forget whose disciple, but like that. So the books are time bombs. But the holy name, I could say many things. There's the English saying, "The rising tide in the harbor raises all boats." There's a very nice purport in the 29th chapter, King Arjuna, in the 4th canto. See, just by our trying, like Prabhupada is saying that on his arrival, he's saying in Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Disappearance Day, March 1975 in Atlanta, that he's telling the whole story how he came and he was given the order in 1922, but I was so rascal, I delayed the matter for almost 40 years. Here I am all, but let me try. And everybody, try, like Prabhupada's let me try. What was the result? So the Lord, seeing the devotee's merciful attempt, the devotee is just like a soldier in the field. Success or failure has no meaning for the devotee. You have brought me here to dance, O Lord, make me dance, make me dance. You've designated me as Bhaktivedanta. Now, if you like, you can really fulfill the true purport of Bhaktivedanta. And with right attitude, signed the most fallen, insignificant beggar. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Commonwealth Pier. In Boston was very nice. We would go every year to this Commonwealth Pier, and Prabhupada first landed. Actually, the first devotee later became Prabhupada's disciple, Chaivan. He later became Chaivan Maharaj. He's passed away a number of years. He was a merchant marine, and he was there when the Jaladuta came into port on that day in September 1965. And he remembered that Prabhupada was on the deck watching, and he just felt compelled to give, full kind of salute to Prabhupada. A true story. Seeing the devotee's merciful attempt enlightens the people from within automatically. The goal of the books is to convince people to chant and dance in ecstasy in Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. I'm traveling all over the world. Everyone is imitating your country, building the skyscraper buildings, Rath Yatra, San Francisco, 1974. You've seen it on the video. So if you kindly dance and chant in emotional love of God, Prabhupada's starting to cry, the whole world will follow you. There'll be no more trouble. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
I would like to know, all these years you've been serving, you moved places, you've gone many different places.
Not so many. One thing that I can recommend from my personal experience, and I think many of you can relate to it, by staying in one place and putting up with everything you got to put up through all the slings and arrows and all the familiarity breeds contempt and, whatever, just to get the job done. It really, stick on that point. So I really have practically been nowhere in the last 10 years, you know, wherever the subway can get me. I think the last time I was out in New York was to go to Mayapur Chandra's, to the wonderful commemoration ceremony for Advaita Priya Prabhu. So now I'm here. I went over the George Washington Bridge. Big treat for me, right? If in Brooklyn, I can go over the B or the D train, so I can get to look over the Manhattan Bridge, you know, instead of being submerged in the subway all the time. Yes.
So what I was saying is that you've gone from one ashram to another. You're in Vrindavan, you're in the US, and I know you've gone through many setbacks also at times.
Yeah.
And what keeps you focused and motivated to keep going day after day?
Well, I mean, look at Srila Prabhupada. Look what he got. I've met such a nice, saintly person. I simply want to please you. Your Prabhupada was very passionate in what he believed in. You can read the Lila Amrita, how, you know, we say that the son acquires the Baba mentality from the mother's side. So his mother, Vajani, who passed away when he was just, I think, 14 or 16 years old, was very firm, insist, you must do this. So, you know, Prabhupada was passionate about following Mahatma Gandhi. Imagine, he worked for 4 years in the Scottish Church's College to get the degree. That wasn't a joke, you know, like one of the highest, most prestigious British-controlled schools with their curriculum. And he felt so much about the Swaraj movement that he just, I will not take this tainted diploma. Then he meets Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Just a few years later, he had to be urged to come. Now I've seen all these sadhus and I don't see, no, you must meet this, you must go. And like immediately, he was like just dumbstruck, flabbergasted, in Prabhupada in his own words. Why did they want to bring Prabhupada there? He was the leader of the group. And they wanted his opinion. If he says that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati is a worthwhile person, that they will all confirm their own intuition. And Prabhupada was the undisputed leader in all affairs. You know, astrologers or palmists look at, whoa. No one can disobey your command. Or right at birth. This child, after the age of 70, will cross the ocean, 100, become a great exponent of religion, and open 108 temples. Even 5,000 years ago. On the other hand, that literature, which is full of the name, fame, form, qualities, and pastimes of the unlimited Supreme Lord, is a different creation meant to bring about a revolution in the misdirected lives of this world civilization. That Narada Muni is predicting to Vyasadeva, write the Bhagavad-Gita, so Prabhupada will make massive book distribution 5,000 years later in the age of Kali Yuga. Very soon, a Senapata Bhakta will appear, Lord Nityananda predicts. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, very soon, a great personality will appear. Satsvarup Maharaj, he entitled, you know, they've reprinted, they reprinted the Leelamrita in India print, but they forgot to put the titles of each volume on it. It's called Volume 1. Lifetime in Preparation. You had mother passing away, and then his spiritual master's institution infighting and disintegrating. Then World War II. Then partition of India into Pakistan. He worked so hard for a free Indian independence, and who were the first leaders? This church and this religion is holding our country back. The factory will be our new temple. Prabhupada's trying to go forward. He was finally independent. And his family. T or me? Well, I guess I'll have to give up my... T or your husband? Well, I guess I'll have to give up my husband. Prabhupada's Bhagavad-Gita, how is it lost? She traded it for tea, his Bhagavatam, his worshipful Bhagavatam. She traded it for tea biscuits, the barter system in the market. Family wouldn't help. His godbrothers wouldn't help. His countrymen wouldn't help. Old age coming upon him. $7 in his pocket. Not knowing, coming on a boat. Who's been on a boat for more than like 10 hours or 12 hours at a time ever in their life? 5 weeks at sea. Arriving in New York City at this time of the year. Take that pilgrimage. 100 West 72nd Street, 143 West 72nd Street, 33 Riverside Drive, and West End Super Ed, which is the end of 72nd Street and Riverside Drive. This is where Prabhupada was living. What did he have to go through? And it didn't end there. Then the Bowery. So there's your inspiration right there. If I've met such a nice saintly person, I will execute his order no matter what. And Prabhupada was always in Transylvania. Prabhupada's passport photo. You look so serious there. You look sad. Oh, that was a moment of ecstasy. So Prabhupada came with a 2-month visa, you know, and he had to extend it. So here we are, April 1967. That's nearly 2 years later. You know, Prabhupada ultimately had to go to Montreal. So he's going with Mukunda, who was, you know, kind of a sharp person to do different things. You can read about his activities with Shamasunder and everyone in London, how he was the one who dealt with all the bureaucrats and fuss-budgety, upper-crusty British officials and things. So Prabhupada is going to see an U.S. immigration and the immigration. So what is your movement all about? What are its aims? What are its disciplines? What are your goals? And Prabhupada saying, you know, no meat, fish, or eggs, and this and that, and no illicit sex, and would spread love of Godhead. And I said, wow. And then she was like amazed. It was like a kind of upper, you know, well-to-do, kind of well-groomed, so to speak, sophisticated woman in her 50s interviewing Prabhupada. And she said, well, that seems like really very difficult, these type of things to do here in this country. And Prabhupada said, no, not at all difficult. I simply have to remember Krishna, and Krishna does everything else. To those who constantly meditate on my transcendental form, I preserve what they have, and I carry what they lack. Duryodhana and Krishna, choice. You can have the army, or you can have Krishna. Duryodhana, oh, I want the army. Numbers, perceivable manpower, statistics. What a fool you are, Arjuna. I want you, my Lord. So the potency of meditating on Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God, the Supreme Controller of everything, is beyond comparison and puts one in the topmost position. So we're followers of Prabhupada. Namaste Saraswati Devi, Gauramani Pacharane, Nirvishesha Sunyavadi, Asmitani Deshatarane. And I had a good experience. I came in 1978. I missed Prabhupada. We had Mukundadatta Prabhu here for two years ago. Who remembers that? Okay. A very wonderful devotee. He's a great scholar. He was 9 years old in 1970 riding bikes with his friends when the devotees moved into 3764 Watsika Avenue, Los Angeles. 5 years later, at the age of, 6 years later, 1976, the age of 15, he becomes Prabhupada's disciple. He's 2 years younger than me, physically. So my father, a World War II veteran, the booming 1950s, he and my mom were both from New York City. And there was only one question to ask back there in the 1950s, and there was only two choices. The question was, where are we going to move to? And the answer was, you could choose Westchester or Long Island. So they chose Long Island, so I didn't know anything. You know, back I was living in Syosset, you know, northeastern Nassau County. There were duck farms, and you know, it was like kind of combined rural and suburban at the time. You know, the late 50s, early 60s. So I never met devotees. So seeing the determination in some of Prabhupada's disciples, I had the opportunity to make friendship with Ayendra Prabhu, who came and spent 5 years in New York from 1981 to 1986. And then he invited me to come and stay in Vrindavan, which I did. I was living there for 12 years, 1999 to 2011, spending like 7 to 9 months a year, only coming back in the summer for a few months. And his determination was very inspiring, and at the same time, his friendship. So, becoming a strong devotee and giving your association qualitatively to others to uplift them in their faith and to inspire them in devotional service is extremely valuable. So we should all aspire in that way. That is our line from Srila Prabhupada. All right, Hare Krishna. What time is it?
7:40.
Okay, so we went 10 minutes over. Ramachan, squeeze one more?
I would just like to make a point about book distribution.
Okay.
I was listening to a seminar by Tamal Krishna Maharaj, who we all know is a real great book distributor and into book distribution. And he made the very, very important point. He said Srila Prabhupada was pushing us to distribute books, not just to give books to others, but because by distributing books, we would become purified. And that the act of attempting to give is for our benefit also. It's not just for others' benefits. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj is making the point of, if you want entrance into Vrindavan, this is the way to get it. Because this will purify you. And he said there is a connection between going on book distribution and making yourself qualified to enter Vrindavan.
Yeah, in the second chapter in the 10th canto, Prayers for Lord Krishna by the demigods and the womb of Mother Devaki, those who cause others to hear and chant, I forget exactly, they will see your lotus feet. And Prabhupada writes in the purport that tapasya in devotional service is necessary. We have to prepare literature, preach to atheistic men, go door to door. Such activity is necessary and leads to the divine position of devotional service. Best I can remember that. All right, Hare Krishna, Ramachandra Prabhu, you can take it away.